The galaxy had never known fear like this. Stars trembled under the shadow of the Varkari Armada, a race of conquerors who spread death wherever they went. Entire civilizations had fallen, their cities burned to ash, their people enslaved or erased. The Varkari were relentless. Their fleets were unstoppable, their weapons unmatched. Across the Council of Galactic Nations, panic spread faster than light. "Resistance is impossible," said Admiral Corrin of Syndrol Prime, his face pale as he addressed the gathered delegates. "Every strategy, every defense we have fails against them. We cannot fight what we cannot even touch." His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. Around him, murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Scientists, diplomats, and military leaders. Each one felt the suffocating weight of hopelessness. Even the bravest voices faltered. But in the midst of despair, a single transmission cut through the static. It came from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy, Earth, a world considered insignificant, its people dismissed as weak and backward. Yet the message was clear, urgent, and impossible to ignore. "We will come. We will stop this war. Prepare yourselves." The council fell silent. None had expected help, especially from humans. For centuries, humans had been considered a minor species, their power limited to their tiny solar system. They were not even part of the Galactic Alliance. Most had forgotten them. But now hope flickered like a fragile flame. Far across the galaxy on Earth, humans were not sending speeches or demands. They were preparing. Hidden beneath the surface, massive factories and secret military facilities hummed with activity. Humans were finishing their most advanced creations, war machines unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These were not ordinary ships. They were titanic dreadnoughts, armored with near-impenetrable shields, bristling with weapons capable of obliterating fleets and tearing apart planets. Captain Mara Lennox stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, her eyes fixed on the dark void of space. Around her, crew members moved efficiently, each one trained for the unimaginable. Mara felt a mix of pride and anxiety. She had seen fear in her crew's eyes, and yet she also saw determination. Every human aboard knew the stakes. Billions of lives depended on them. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "They think they are unstoppable. They've never faced us." Not really. The humans' preparation was more than technology. It was discipline, courage, and unity. Unlike other species, humans had survived against impossible odds, endured countless threats, and still stood tall. That resilience flowed through every member of the crew, giving them strength that even the Varkari could not comprehend. As the humans readied their fleet, the Council of Galactic Nations watched from afar, unsure if this small, underestimated species could make a difference. Some delegates scoffed. Others clung desperately to hope. But for the first time, across a galaxy dominated by fear, whispers of possibility spread. Maybe they can stop the Varkari. Maybe, just maybe, humanity can win. And so the stage was set. The stars waited, silent witnesses to what was about to come. Humanity, a species once dismissed as insignificant, prepared to step into a war no one else could stop. Their war machines gleamed in the darkness, engines humming like the heartbeat of a storm. And somewhere deep in the void, the Varkari Armada moved closer, unaware that their worst nightmare was coming, not as diplomats, not as soldiers, but as humans, unstoppable and determined. The galaxy held its breath. The Varkari Armada swept across the outer rim worlds with terrifying speed. Entire colonies vanished in hours, cities disintegrating under relentless bombardment. Smoke and fire stretched across planets like veins of death. The galaxy had grown numb to their cruelty, but whispers of hope began to spread. Someone was coming. On the edge of the system, human dreadnoughts appeared. Their presence was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable against the backdrop of space. But when their engines flared and their shields shimmered in the void, the Varkari paused. For the first time, their arrogance faltered. The scanners could not match the energy signatures. The weapons they were familiar with seemed trivial. Captain Mara Lennox stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, her hand resting lightly on the console. Her eyes scanned the approaching enemy fleet, their sheer numbers enough to make a lesser commander freeze. But Mara did not hesitate. "All units prepare for engagement. Fire only when I give the order. Remember precision, speed, and coordination. Let them see why humans are not to be underestimated." Her crew moved with practiced efficiency. Every human on board understood the danger, yet none wavered. They had trained for this moment, prepared for the impossible. The dreadnoughts were colossal, almost mountain-like in size, but they moved with a grace and coordination that was almost artistic. Humans were not just fighting. They were dancing in the void. Each strike a calculated step, each maneuver a deadly pattern. The Varkari, confident in their superiority, launched their first wave of attack. Swarms of sleek, deadly ships surged toward the humans, plasma weapons cutting through space like lightning. Mara's voice was calm, unwavering. Brace for impact. Return fire when ready. The first human salvo hit and chaos erupted in the Varkari lines. Entire squadrons disintegrated before they could reach the human ships. Explosions of light illuminated the battlefield, turning the darkness of space into a storm of fire. The Varkari roared in disbelief. No one had ever fought back like this. No one had ever turned their relentless assault into an organized, unstoppable counter. The humans did not merely attack, they adapted. With each strike, they learned. With every enemy maneuver, they adjusted. The Varkari were experienced, trained killers, but they had never faced opponents who could predict, adapt, and strike with both brute force and ingenuity. The humans were relentless, their precision terrifying, their courage unmatched. Across the galaxy, observers watched in stunned silence. Systems that had prepared to surrender suddenly reconsidered. "Look at them," whispered an alien ambassador. "They fight with a courage we've never seen, and a strategy that defies logic. They are unstoppable." For hours the battle raged. The humans moved as one, each dreadnought covering another, each salvo tearing into the enemy lines. The Varkari fleet faltered. Their formations broke. Ships fled only to be intercepted by the next wave. By the time the engagement ended, more than half of the Varkari ships had been destroyed. Yet the humans did not celebrate. Captain Mara stood silently on the bridge, watching the remnants of the enemy flee into the void. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. Her crew understood. The galaxy's nightmare had only just begun, but so had its salvation. Whispers of hope spread faster than the battle itself. Systems under siege began to resist. Colonies previously abandoned sent out signals of support. The humans were no longer just a species. They were a symbol, a storm rising in the darkness, and the Varkari had no idea what was coming. As the humans regrouped, engines glowing softly in the void, the galaxy began to realize something important. This small, underestimated species had changed everything. They had turned despair into hope, fear into courage, and helplessness into defiance. Somewhere, in the distant reaches of the galaxy, the Varkari High Command received reports of the human fleet. Their arrogance cracked, replaced by fear, a feeling they had never known. The humans were not just fighting. They were a force of nature, a tide that could not be stopped by weapons or fear alone. Captain Mara's voice echoed one final time across the comms of her fleet. "We fight to protect. We fight to survive. And we will not fail. For every world they destroy, we will rise stronger. This war ends with us." And for the first time in decades, the galaxy dared to believe that maybe humanity could win. The galaxy was changing. The humans, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, were now the spark of hope the stars had been waiting for. Systems that had resigned themselves to defeat now rallied. Ships that had been hiding in fear took heart. The Varkari Armada, which had once spread terror without challenge, was beginning to falter. Captain Mara Lennox stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, her eyes scanning the holographic displays showing the broken Varkari formations. "They are not used to this," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "They are not used to being challenged." Her voice carried a quiet fire, the same fire that burned in every human soul aboard the fleet. The humans struck with precision, moving faster and smarter than any other species could imagine. Each dreadnought seemed alive, responding instinctively to danger, coordinating with the others with near-perfect timing. The humans fought not just with their weapons, but with their courage, their adaptability, and their unyielding will. In the outer rim colonies, liberated worlds began to celebrate. Citizens who had once cowered in the shadows now cheered as human ships appeared in orbit. Children ran through the streets waving makeshift flags and calling out names of the brave warriors above. Soldiers wiped tears from their eyes, overwhelmed by the gratitude they had longed to witness. Every act of bravery inspired the next, and soon, a network of resistance stretched across the galaxy. Yet war was never easy. Mara knew the cost of victory. Human ships were damaged. Crew members had fallen. Every victory carried a weight that pressed heavily on the hearts of those who survived. Mara often stood in silence on the bridge, staring into the void, thinking of the lives lost and the worlds destroyed. But even in the shadow of grief, she saw purpose. Every sacrifice was a step toward peace, toward ending a war that no one else could stop. The humans' unpredictability unnerved the Varkari. Their calculations, their rigid battle strategies no longer worked against humans who adapted with almost frightening speed. One human dreadnought would dive through a gap in the fleet, striking a vulnerable cruiser, while another circled behind to intercept reinforcements. It was coordination unlike any the Varkari had ever faced. In one key battle over a star system on the verge of falling, Mara's fleet faced a brutal challenge. The Varkari had fortified the planet's orbit with massive warships and orbital cannons capable of obliterating entire fleets. But the humans did not falter. Mara's voice was calm, steady, carrying over the comms. Divide. Strike the weak points. Protect each other. Remember why we fight. The attack began. Human ships darted like lightning, shields absorbing the first bombardments while plasma and missile salvos tore through the Varkari defenses. The planet shook under the bombardment, but the humans pressed on. Hours later, the Varkari fleet lay in ruin, their remaining ships fleeing in panic. The humans had done the impossible. Across the galaxy, news of the humans' victories inspired allies and terrified enemies. Worlds once lost to despair now believed in resistance. Systems that had once served the Varkari were sending fleets to join the humans. Even among neutral observers, awe replaced doubt. Aliens whispered in council chambers, "The humans, they are something else. They fight not for power but for life itself." Back on the Titan's wrath, Mara allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She knew the war was far from over. The Varkari would strike again, more viciously, more desperate than ever. But humanity had shown that even against the strongest force in the galaxy, courage, unity, and determination could turn the tide. Mara looked at her crew, each one weary but resolute. "We are the storm they never expected," she said. "We are the force they cannot understand, and we will not stop until this war is over." And in that moment, among the stars, the turning tide of the war became clear. Humanity was no longer just a species, it was a beacon, unstoppable, fierce, and unbreakable. The galaxy began to realize that a war no one could stop might yet be ended by humans, with their courage, their hearts, and their war machines. The Varkari, once feared without question, were beginning to understand that the humans were something entirely different, something they had never faced before, something they could not destroy easily. The galaxy held its breath as the Varkari, cornered and furious, revealed their deadliest weapon yet, the Star Devourer, a massive planet-sized war machine. It glowed with a terrifying energy that could consume entire star systems. Entire fleets had vanished beneath its destructive power, and now the humans would face it. Even the most battle-hardened species shivered at the thought of confronting such a monstrosity. Captain Mara Lennox stood on the bridge of the Titan's wrath, her hands gripping the console. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on her. "This is what we've trained for," she said, her voice steady despite the fear lingering in the room. Her crew nodded, each one aware that the lives of billions depended on their courage and skill. "Remember," Mara continued, "we fight not for glory but to protect. Stay sharp, adapt, and survive." The human dreadnoughts moved into position. Each ship was a fortress, bristling with weapons capable of leveling continents. Yet Mara knew sheer firepower alone would not win this battle. The Star Devourer was massive, and a direct assault would be suicide. Humans had always relied on more than strength. They relied on cunning, adaptability, and courage. As the first wave of Varkari fighters surged forward, the humans responded with precision. Plasma beams and missile barrages tore through the enemy ships, scattering them before they could reach the dreadnoughts. Mara's fleet moved like a living organism, each vessel anticipating the movements of the others, covering vulnerabilities and exploiting openings in the enemy lines. The Star Devourer unleashed its first attack. Energy tendrils arced across space, vaporizing everything in their path. Human ships dodged and maneuvered with speed and coordination, avoiding annihilation by fractions of seconds. Mara's mind raced, calculating angles, predicting patterns, coordinating counterstrikes. Every maneuver was a delicate dance with death. Hours passed like minutes. The Varkari unleashed wave after wave of reinforcements, yet the humans adapted. They split into multiple squads, each targeting weak points, confusing the Star Devourer's automated defenses. Mara's voice rang across the comms. Do not falter. Every strike counts. Protect each other. Trust your instincts. Trust your crew. We will survive this. In a daring move, Mara led a small strike team directly into the heart of the Star Devourer's defensive ring. Her dreadnought dove through a storm of energy beams, dodging debris and enemy fire with uncanny precision. Another human ship followed, striking from a different angle to overload the weapon's shielding. Explosions tore through the Star Devourer, shaking even the massive dreadnoughts. The Varkari command erupted in confusion and rage. Their once perfect strategy was crumbling before their eyes. They had never faced opponents who combined fearlessness, ingenuity, and unwavering resolve. Humans were unpredictable, unrelenting, and deadly, and they fought not for conquest but to save lives. Finally, Mara saw the opening she had been waiting for. With one final coordinated attack, the human dreadnought struck the core of the Star Devourer. Energy erupted in a blinding flash, tearing the weapon apart from the inside. The Varkari fleet reeled as the Star Devourer collapsed, consumed by its own power. Ships were flung into the void, their systems destroyed, their crews defeated. The humans emerged battered but victorious. They had survived the galaxy's most terrifying weapon, and had struck a decisive blow against their most feared enemy. Mara allowed herself a brief sigh of relief, looking at her crew. We did it, she whispered, though there was no celebration. The cost had been high, and there were more battles to fight. But one truth had become clear. The Varkari, for all their power, were not invincible. Across the galaxy, news of the Star Devourer's destruction spread. Systems under siege dared to rise, inspired by humanity's courage. Aliens who had given up hope now whispered of the humans as legends, fierce, unstoppable, and unafraid. Mara turned to the viewport, watching the stars twinkle above. This is only the beginning, she said softly. We fight not for revenge but for the future. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and we will not stop. The Varkari had unleashed their greatest weapon, and humanity had survived. The war was far from over, but the tide had shifted. For the first time, the galaxy glimpsed the unstoppable force that humans could be. The Varkari were reeling, their deadliest weapon destroyed, their fleet scattered, and their strategy shattered. They no longer held the unstoppable aura that had terrified the galaxy for decades. But the humans knew better than to underestimate them. Captain Mara Lennox stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, her eyes scanning the galaxy. Every star, every system was a potential battlefield. Every world under Varkari rule was a life that could be freed. We move forward, she commanded, her voice calm but firm. No hesitation. No mercy for those who enslave. Protect the innocent. Strike with precision. Every world counts. Her crew responded with determined nods. The human dreadnoughts roared to life, engines blazing like the fire of their purpose. They were not just a fleet. They were a force of hope, and the galaxy watched as it advanced. The first target was a Varkari-controlled star system known for its brutal occupation. Orbital defenses bristled with weapons while countless Varkari fighters patrolled the skies. But humans had a plan. Mara divided her fleet into multiple squads, each one executing synchronized maneuvers designed to confuse and overwhelm the enemy. Shields glowed, weapons charged, and in a storm of plasma and laser fire the humans struck. Explosions tore through the orbital defenses, tearing apart entire warships. The Varkari fighters were swift but disorganized, unable to predict the humans' adaptability. Mara's flagship sliced through enemy lines, shielding smaller vessels and guiding them toward weak points in the Varkari formations. In every corner of the battlefield, humans fought with courage and ingenuity. They were not only survivors, they were protectors, champions of freedom in a galaxy that had long forgotten hope. On the planets below, the people watched from hiding. Families cowered in fear, expecting annihilation. But instead, the humans came not to destroy, but to liberate. Ground troops carried in massive dropships engaged the Varkari with surgical precision, freeing prisoners, dismantling war machines, and inspiring the oppressed to rise up. Children ran into the arms of soldiers, laughing through tears, while elders wept with relief at the sight of freedom returning. Every liberated world became a testament to human resolve. Yet the war left scars. Ships were damaged, crews were lost, and the human soldiers mourned those who would never return. Mara often walked the corridors of her ship alone, thinking of the lives lost, the sacrifices made. But she knew the cost was worth it. Every battle fought, every world freed was a step toward ending a war no one else could stop. As the human fleets moved from system to system, the Varkari scrambled to regroup. Desperation replaced arrogance in their command centers. Their attacks became more erratic, more dangerous, but the humans were ready. They had learned, adapted, and become a storm no enemy could outrun. Every encounter was met with a combination of strategy, courage, and sheer determination. In a decisive engagement above the Varkari's core colonies, Mara's fleet executed a daring maneuver. While one squad engaged the enemy's main defenses, another struck its supply lines, cutting off reinforcements and forcing the Varkari into chaos. Explosions lit up the void as dreadnoughts clashed, each human ship moving like a predator, precise and unstoppable. By the end of the battle, the Varkari had lost most of their fleet and many of their occupied worlds. Entire systems rejoiced as humans and local resistance forces secured victory. Messages of hope and gratitude spread across the liberated regions. The galaxy, which had once trembled in fear, now whispered the name of a small, seemingly insignificant species, humanity. Mara stood on the bridge, looking at the stars scattered across the void, each one a world now free from tyranny. She felt the weight of the war, but also the surge of hope. "We fight for them," she said quietly, her voice echoing through the ship. "For every life, every family, every world, and we will not stop until they are all safe." The humans had become more than a fleet. They were a force of justice, a beacon of hope, and a warning to anyone who dared to oppress. The final offensive was underway, and the galaxy had begun to believe that the impossible could be achieved. The Varkari homeworld loomed ahead, a dark, twisted world of spires and fortresses, scarred by centuries of conquest. From orbit, Mara Lennox's fleet could see the planet's defenses bristling with massive orbital cannons, shield generators, and legions of Varkari warships. The enemy's arrogance was still strong, but the humans were ready. They had learned to fight beyond fear, beyond logic. They fought with heart. Captain Mara stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, her gaze fixed on the enemy fleet. Her crew moved like clockwork, each knowing their role in the deadly dance ahead. Mara's voice cut through the tension. "This is the fight that ends it all. Not for power, not for revenge, but for freedom. For every life the Varkari have destroyed, we will protect 10 more. Stay strong. Stay alive. Fight as one." The humans struck first, moving in coordinated waves. Dreadnoughts split into multiple formations, exploiting gaps in the Varkari defenses. Plasma beams tore through shields, missiles shredded warships, and human pilots weaved through enemy fire like they were part of the stars themselves. The Varkari retaliated with fury, sending their elite forces to overwhelm the intruders. Yet every attack was met with human adaptability. They dodged, countered, and struck back with terrifying precision. As the battle raged, Mara's communications officer, Lieutenant Jaron, reported casualties. "We've lost 5 ships, Captain. Ground reinforcements are delayed." Mara's jaw tightened. Losses were inevitable, but fear was forbidden. "Focus on the fleet that remains. Protect each other. Remember why we fight. We cannot falter now," she said firmly. Her voice steadied the crew, inspiring courage in the face of overwhelming odds. On the planet's surface, liberated populations watched the sky ignite with human attacks. Cities under the Varkari's control trembled as orbiting dreadnoughts targeted fortresses and weapon silos. Human ground forces deployed in massive dropships, landing with precision, freeing prisoners and dismantling the enemy from within. The humans fought not for glory, but for the lives of those who had suffered for far too long. Mara's strategy was both brilliant and terrifying. While one squad engaged the Varkari's main fleet, another struck its supply lines and command centers, cutting off reinforcements and creating chaos. Every maneuver seemed impossible, yet the humans executed it flawlessly. They were relentless, adaptive, and fearless, a storm the Varkari could not predict or survive. Hours stretched into what felt like eternity. Explosions shook the void. Smoke and fire spread across the planet's orbit. Ships burned, but the humans pressed on. The Varkari, once confident in their superiority, faltered. Their formations collapsed. Their leaders panicked, and their warriors realized too late that they had underestimated a species that refused to surrender. Finally, Mara saw the moment she had prepared for. With a coordinated strike, the human dreadnoughts pierced the heart of the Varkari command fleet. The flagship, largest and most fortified, erupted in a blinding explosion. Shockwaves tore through the enemy lines, scattering survivors into the void. The planet's defenses went dark. Humanity had struck at the core, and the enemy was broken. The humans did not cheer, but they allowed themselves a moment of quiet relief. Captain Mara looked out over the battlefield, seeing the stars flicker with the aftermath of their victory. "We have done what no one else could," she said softly. "We fought for them. We fought for everyone, and now the galaxy can begin to heal." The Varkari, once feared as unstoppable, had been humbled. Their homeworld secured by human courage and ingenuity, the galaxy began to hope again. Systems that had trembled in fear now dared to rise. Humanity had not just fought. They had unleashed a force that would be remembered for generations. Mara turned to her crew, weary but alive. "This is the moment we prove who we are. We fight with our hearts, with our minds, and with every ounce of strength. Humanity is unstoppable. Humanity is free." And in that moment, amid the debris and silence of the battlefield, the galaxy realized the truth. Humans were no longer just a species. They were legends. Fierce, unyielding, and eternal, the battle was over. Silence stretched across the Varkari homeworld, broken only by the soft hum of human engines and the distant echoes of destruction. The Varkari, once feared as the galaxy's unstoppable conquerors, had been defeated. Their fleets lay in ruins, their planets liberated, their empire shattered. The galaxy, long ruled by fear, began to breathe again. Captain Mara Lennox stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, staring at the stars scattered across the void. She thought of the countless worlds that had suffered under the Varkari's rule, of the millions of lives lost, of the children who would now grow up free. Victory was theirs, but the cost had been high. Mara felt the weight of every sacrifice, every fallen crew member, and every destroyed world. Yet she also felt the surge of hope that flowed through the galaxy. Across liberated systems, humans and local resistance forces worked together to restore order. Citizens emerged from hiding, embracing their rescuers with tears and laughter. Families who had lived in fear for generations celebrated the first sunrise of freedom. The human fleet, once a force of war, had become a symbol of salvation. Their war machines had destroyed enemies, yes, but they had also saved millions of lives. Humanity had not sought glory. They had sought justice. The Galactic Council convened, their halls filled with representatives from countless species. For the first time, they looked at humans with awe rather than doubt. "They fought not for conquest, but for life itself," whispered one ambassador. Another added, "They turned the tide of a war that no one else could stop. They are extraordinary." Across the galaxy, a single truth spread like wildfire. Humans were no longer insignificant. Humans were a force to be respected, feared, and revered. Mara addressed the liberated worlds through the Council's communication networks. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of history. "We did not fight for power. We fought for every life threatened, for every child who deserved a future. We fought because freedom is worth every sacrifice. Remember this: courage and unity can change the fate of the universe. No force, no matter how mighty, can stop those who fight for what is right." On Earth, the people listened. They had always known their species was capable of greatness. But now the galaxy recognized it too. Stories of human bravery spread from system to system, inspiring hope and admiration. Children looked up at the night sky and imagined themselves among the stars, dreaming of the day they too might defend what was just and good. Humanity's legend had begun, and it would echo for generations. The Varkari had been defeated, but Mara knew vigilance was necessary. The galaxy would rebuild and threats would return. Yet for now she allowed herself a moment of peace. She walked along the corridors of the Titan's Wrath, passing crew members who were tired but smiling. They had seen horrors, yes, but they had also witnessed triumph, courage, and the power of a species that refused to surrender. Mara paused at the viewport, watching a liberated planet bathed in sunlight. The ocean sparkled, the cities stood tall, and the people thrived. Humanity had changed the course of history, showing that even against the deadliest enemies, a species could rise above fear and doubt. Humans had unleashed their war machines, but more importantly, they had unleashed something far greater: hope, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. No empire, no weapon, no army could ever truly dominate when faced with humans, fierce, fearless, and determined. The war that no one else could stop had been ended by a species once underestimated. Humanity had proven that courage, unity, and the will to protect were more powerful than any weapon. And so, the stars shone brighter than ever. The human fleet drifted through space not as conquerors but as guardians. Across the galaxy, civilizations rebuilt. Children laughed. Families reunited. The legend of humanity spread like a flame that could never be extinguished. Captain Mara Lennox stood quietly on the bridge one last time, her eyes on the horizon. "We came to protect," she whispered. And we did. Humanity is free, and the galaxy will never forget it. The war was over. The humans had triumphed. And a new dawn had begun, a dawn of hope, courage, and a legacy that would echo through the stars forever.